When you look in the mirror, you want to be able to see yourself and know that you're living up to who you see yourself as, not pretending or lying to yourself. And that honest conversation you have can be very difficult. Making sure you have the right people in your corner to navigate those conversations is very important. Today, you're going to meet somebody who has had those honest conversations with himself, and I'm very grateful to call a friend and a brother. This individual has traveled the world as a male supermodel. He's helped people reconnect with mindful movement. He is the founder of his own mindful movement. This individual is someone who trains hard, loves hard, and is there for people when it counts. I'm so hyped to introduce my dear friend, former training partner, still awesome human being in my life, and a soon to be husband, Mr. Jules Horn. How are you today, sir?
Thank you, brother. That's a beautiful introduction. I appreciate that. I'm doing very well, and I'm really excited to reconnect and being here right now. It's a long time coming, so thank you for having me on.
Bro, it's an overdue podcast that we've been trying to record, and I'm so happy that we could finally do it. Jules and I met at Zach Pagrove's Run Cult, we'll call it. I like to call it Run Club just because I relate to that a little bit more than a cult. And it's funny because we're both very competitive dudes. And so we're keeping up with the front leading group. I think we were running like 7-minute miles, something like that. And I was in a space where I was trying to work on my speed while training for an ultra. Side note, those two do not go hand in hand. We're running, and I don't know this guy, but I see him, and I just look over and I say, "What's up?" And we end up talking the entire time, and we haven't stopped talking since. This guy is the real deal, the real deal. We're going to have some hard conversations today, but I'm excited to get into it. You ready, bro?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm really excited too.
So you moved from New York to LA. What happened? How have things been going for you since?
I moved to LA in 2021 when I met my now fiance, future wife. And I was pretty fed up, and I was not living in the right spots in LA. It's a very interesting city because there's so many different pockets, and every different part of town is really different. In a sense, I was in West Hollywood first, hated it. I was in Beverly Hills. And then I was like, I'm ready to go back to New York. So that's when we were partially packing our stuff. And for 3 months, we were like, okay, give it another shot. So, and that's when we met. You know, back then I was full-time modeling. It's a very interesting industry because you can chase something. I was chasing, oh, I need to do X, Y, and Z, a big campaign, more and more and more. And then eventually you have no control over your destiny in a sense, because it's an industry that's pretty much just determined whether they like your face or they don't, or they like your personality or they don't. And so much of that is really not in my hand, you know. And I'm 35 now, so last year I was 34, and eventually I was doing it for 10 years full time, and I was like, it kind of like feels, I had this nudge always like I need to take my life in my own hands. Yeah, when we met, I was big into running and training for that sub 90 minutes half marathon, the United half marathon in New York. And I wanted to do it nose breathing because I did the whole nose breathing breathwork and coaching program in the past. And it was like, this must be doable. So all my training back then was like just nose breathing only. And I still do that, you know, day in and day out. So yeah, I moved back to New York from New York when we met to LA in March, right after this race. And within a couple of days, I did one long run, like 2.5 hours or so on the beach, not properly hydrating and not properly fueling, just going nuts once again. And the next day I woke up and I couldn't walk I could not walk. Ended up lasting for over 5 days. And I was like, this was a kind of, you know, whether you call it rock bottom or just a wake up call for myself, where I was like, okay, you have to get your shit together on a physical, but also on a mental level, because you're not going to become a pro athlete anymore. Potentially I could if I want to, but it's, you know, it's one of those things. It's like, do you want to chase it or do you want to build something that lasts? So that's when I connected basically with Human Garage. I realized how important fascia is for the body, and I never really got into it. So I dug really deep, connected with the founders, was able to meet with them, and they mentored me. And that's when my whole trajectory of life, and on a personal level, but also on a career level, completely changed, in a sense where I was like, okay, I now have more of a tool to help myself physically to get finally out of pain, because I had chronic lower back pain since my parents got divorced when I was 18, which has a lot to do with emotions, you know. So I was understanding that, and then I was like, okay, back then I had about I believe like 160,000 followers on Instagram, but it was all just like modeling stuff, guys and followers who wanted to see me half naked and didn't give a shit who I actually am. So, and I was like, okay, I have this platform already. So it was like I doubled down on that. And it's once again, it just shows when you put in some work and effort and you actually want to educate people or help other people that it always comes back. So within the last, 12 months, 11 months, I was pretty much like tripling my following almost and was able to help a lot of people, and that's where I'm at right now. And then we started working a lot with people one-on-one. So as a practitioner for Human Garage for the fascia stuff. And then eventually over the last 3 months, I just realized how important the breath is, which I knew already, but I just put it all together, everything I learned from all my mentors over the last couple of years. And then I was like, okay, I can actually create something very unique that's not been around if you combine everything and then have the ability. And I know I'm pretty good in putting something to the table where people understand it, where it's not getting too much in detail. So they have a problem, there's a solution, and then there's an outcome. And I'm always really good in explaining that and showing that to people. So that's what I did. And then I created mindful movement. So it's moving and mending, just being mindful about yourself. And the goal for that is really to coming back to the center and getting out of pain. And then from there, you can do whatever you want in your life. I always say to people, I'm here to open the door. Help the person walk through the door, whether the person wants to stay in the room. And if the person chooses to stay in the room, they can build that room out as large and as beautiful as they want. And I believe that's what life is all about, And then for me, it's not like, oh, you shouldn't do X, Y, and Z, you shouldn't do running. There's so much controversy right now on social media everywhere. Everyone is like, you shouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, no, you should be doing everything what you want. But you have to have some form of a baseline where, okay, my nervous system is regulated. I know how to breathe. I know how to get myself out of fight or flight. And I'm ready to attack when it's time for it, And the big part, what I struggled with over the last 10 years of my life was really just like being constantly in fight or flight mode and being constantly on the go, go, go. And eventually your body is not able to do that anymore, For some people it might take longer, for others it might take less of a time. But if you look at it in a sense where we have so many, I call them invisible enemies on a daily basis, whether it's screen, whether it's social media, work, life in general, relationships. You have 2 kids. I'm planning to have children. We're getting married like in 8 weeks. So there's a lot of enemies that already attacking you, So if I then add more through physical training, which we all do and want to do and we need to do, then eventually this stress cup just overflows all the time. So, and that's when I was realizing when you actually take stress out through simple things like breathing, fascia stuff, neck training, and just making you more resilient, all of a sudden you're able to actually do more and you won't burn out as much. And then, your life becomes so much fuller in a sense. And I can be more present for myself, but more so for other people, my partner, future children, and so forth, And that's where I'm at right now.
It's really a special journey, and seeing how you've gone through it over the last year plus and the evolution that's come along with it. There's a learning curve that comes along with trying to be great, and seeing how you've channeled it specifically through your body as a mechanism. It's been awesome to watch because I learn. I will test different things that you're putting out there. Some of it too far out there for me, but at the same time, there's a lot of grounding practices. It's a testament to your willingness and ability to test and experiment, which not a lot of people do. And I think you putting yourself on the cutting board and making an example of yourself to show the output and being so open about where you had that wake up call, because I remember when you had that run and you experienced that pain, you just kind of stopped so abruptly after we had done like tens and tens and tens of miles together. But we still had all of these other common ground elements to our lives that allowed us to bond. What we talk about a lot is how we bond through training, how that amplifies a relationship because you're someone who's willing to suffer. We'd wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, run around Central Park as fast as we could for an hour, and then go on with our days and in the freezing cold. And you did accomplish that, if I'm not mistaken, the sub 90-minute half.
Yeah, 87 minutes. nose breathing only. So I was very happy about that.
And it's a testament to the kind of athlete you are and the discipline that you have. But something that I want to talk about, something I've been meaning to talk about, and I have with Marcus Philly, but I feel that you, as a retired male supermodel, I guess we'll call it, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Yeah, I'm still assigned with agencies and I'm still doing some work, you know. It's something, when it's there, I'm doing it, but it's not where I'm putting my entire energy there anymore, you know.
For a young man who comes from a small village in Germany to making it to the highest heights of the modeling world and building an incredible network and modeling for brands like, I don't know, maybe you want to rattle a couple off. Calvin Klein. What are a couple others?
I never really worked for Calvin, but I did work for like Ralph Lauren, you know.
Ralph Lauren, pardon me.
Yeah, one of my highlights were probably 2017 in March. I was walking for Chanel with Karl Lagerfeld in Paris, and it was my only fashion show I actually ever did, proper fashion show. And you know, it's one of those highlights. You meet this guy who's German, and then I back then got discovered 2016 by Bruce Weber, who was one of the biggest photographers in the world at that time, and I was kind of like partially his muse and did a lot of amazing things, traveled the world, as he said, and met a lot of amazing people. And I'm very grateful for that, you know.
So one of the things that I want to talk to you about is body dysmorphia and body image. This is something that I struggled with and I imagine you dealt with. And you've shown your transformations where even though you were very fit and there's an aesthetic that you had and have, how have you navigated the internal dialogue of body dysmorphia as a man?
Well, this is, you know, it's a very interesting topic because in the end of the day, it really comes back down to just being present in the moment. And I know that sounds most likely a little bit cheesy, but it's okay if you accept yourself the way you are right now, which is a learning curve, you know, and I've still have much to learn about that because I believe it's an endless journey. And in the end of the day, if you look at social media, you know, and I remember Marcus Philly's posts about that, you know, you achieve a certain physique, whether it's like you super lean, super shredded, and then at that time, and I had those moments many times in my life, at that same time, you think, oh, I'm out of shape. And then you look back like 6 months later at pictures, you're like, how the fuck, what did I do back then, you know? So it's like this weird thing. It's like, how can I be the best version of myself and look the way I want to look without putting too much pressure on it? And it comes really down to like intuition in a sense, like, okay, we all have a baseline of nutrition that we know that really fuels our body and helps us to achieve a certain physique. And, you know, if I eat too many calories and don't put out too much, I'm not going to get there. But in the end of the day, what really helps me is just acceptance, you know, and surrendering. It's probably the two most important parts. What I feel like is like, okay, we all go through seasons, and the season, when I look at people who really have been in amazing shape for years at a time, you know, all natural and no like steroids or anything like this, and who maintain that, most of that is really, they don't care about it as much. It's not their main focus. It's just a byproduct, you know. When you don't chase a body or a physique, or you don't chase an extreme diet, and you don't chase an extreme movement, and you just really focus on what's important, meaning how much do you show up for yourself on a daily basis? How much do you take care of yourself? And then the bigger one is like, how do you show up for the people you actually love, you know? And if those two are taken care of, and you do, you know, what we all know what's important is like eating good food, healthy food, moving your body often, sleeping proper, and taking care of yourself, then all that will come. Because everything else, if I put the physique on top, then the movement will lack of that. Because if I want to be like stage ready, shredded, I shouldn't be going on a 10-mile run, you know? So there's always the back and forth, but in the end of the day, it's like, okay, we all have different genetics, we all have different baseline physique, but the most important thing is really just to be taking care of yourself on an emotional level and loving the people around you, and then the rest, if you do the small things right, the big stuff will eventually come. And that's what I still have sometimes to struggle with, because I'm at points very impatient. And let's say I've done a lot of longer fasts, for example. So when you want to change body composition and you're like, okay, I don't really want to do something extreme anymore. Yeah, if I can go on a 7-day water fast, of course I'd be shredded after, because you don't eat for 7 days, right? So, but in the 7 days you can't move proper. And I'm not saying fasting is better, still do it. But it's more like I took out the vanity part of it. Where I'm like, okay, now I'm fasting because I want to actually be more connected to myself on a spiritual level and want to just have a pause. But it's really the part where, like, okay, you have to be patient. And as long as you put in the work and as long as you take care of yourself, the results eventually will show up. And it's just like being, as Goggins always says, right? You have to, you want to be able to watch the grass grow. Otherwise, you want to be in for the long run. Otherwise, it's not going to be sustainable. And for me, it was always like, okay, I was modeling full time, and then there's a certain size you shouldn't be exceeding in a sense. I always put that pressure too much on myself because at times my agents were actually saying you should put on some muscle, you're way too skinny. There was a time when it was vegan 2019 to 2021, and I was like, I'm 6 foot and I was 155 pounds. Like, I look back at videos or pictures, my legs was like the size of a toothpick and I was just super skinny. The interesting part is I wasn't in a relationship back then. So when you don't have a full relationship with someone you love, or like, I didn't sleep around with 100 different women or something like this, then you also don't know how your hormonal balance is. So now I'm like, okay, I realize whether you have your sex drive, your libido is off or not when you're in a relationship, because it's just regular, like it's just normal. So, and back then I was just like starving myself in a sense and not eating anything, and then became this sick downward spiral where it's like, okay, maybe I can go below 150 pounds. Let's see how I feel then. And, I snapped out of that and then put on some weight. And then it comes back down to like, okay, now you got to accept yourself and don't give a shit about the scale anymore, because the scale doesn't really mean anything anyways. I can be 160 pounds and like chubby, or I can be like 170 pounds and have like low body fat, but be like really muscular and energized and vital. So it's all about acceptance and like just like moving the needle in the right direction, and not really looking at other people too much, because everyone has different genetics and everyone has a different baseline where they can go and where you can go. But as we both are so similar, we always want to cut edge a little bit and want to be like at the 0.1%. And it's like, okay. And then in the end of the day, it's like, yeah, you want to have a physique that's where other people look up to. Because if I want to help people through physical movements, breathing and so forth, and I'm completely out of shape, it's like you're not going to hire a nutritionist either if the person is like 300 pounds overweight. So it needs to translate into life. And I feel with a society where we live in, too much acceptance is also not good, because then all of a sudden it's like, okay, oh, any body image is fine, but we also have to draw the line somewhere and saying what's healthy and what is not. I'm always going to be a person who's chasing the part where it might not be as healthy anymore on a hormonal level or something, but I want to look a certain way. And I know you're the same way, where we're like, okay, there's a aesthetic part to it. It's just about accepting that we're a little bit out there, and then you push a little bit harder and you just become the person you always wanted to be. And that's really what it is. But being in there for the long run rather than just like chasing a short-term outcome. Because if I go on a crazy calorie restricted diet and I get in like prime shape, what's gonna happen then? I'm gonna bounce back and like I'll be miserable. So right now where I'm at, I'm like 175, put on probably 10 pounds since we were running last year. And it's just really muscle, because through opening the body and opening the fascia and everything, all of a sudden, like breathing proper, my body is actually able to grow into the frame what it's meant to be. I'm not crazy workouts at the gym or something for strength and mass. It's more like I move my body. I use a lot of kettlebells, use mace bells. I still run, I sprint. I do neck training and all that stuff, a lot of breathing. And then all of a sudden, I started gaining muscle without even trying. Then, as we all know, the more muscle you have, the more body fat you'll be able to strip off, because it's just, you have a higher metabolic rate. And yeah, it's just, it's an interesting topic, because right now, when you go on social media, I'd say 90% of the people who are actually having like an incredible physique, or who look a certain way, probably on some form of steroid or like testosterone replacement therapy, and they all in their mid 20s to like 30s, which you should never be doing anyways. But it's that's a vanity part that I kind of like try to let completely die over the last year, you know.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Inspired. My name is Jonatahn, and I have a quick favor to ask you. If you're getting any value out of this content, please take a second to subscribe to the channel. You help us reach more people, and you can also stay up to date with all the latest content coming your way. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's that line between positive self-talk, self-love, complacency, and acceptance, to your point, where these conversations need to be normalized, because I don't talk on this podcast or in my circles enough about TRT, even though that conversation is starting to be more normalized now, I would say. And I was always mystified by how, even you were saying, the people that maintain a certain level of fitness and aesthetic, they seem to do it so effortlessly. Again, it comes down to that radical presence, and it's not the top priority for them. It's just a part of who they are. And I think getting to that tier, and something that we've also talked about, is taking a more gentle approach. How can I achieve the same results with a more gentle approach? And that's something I've also aimed to explore. And I also think I'm going through it now, from the start of the year, running 50 miles a week or more, to and 5 lifts a week, to 30 to 40 miles a week and 3 lifts, having a bit more muscle, being a bit leaner, eating around the same, but my performance improves. Leading that cortisol driven lifestyle, that stress inducing hormone type of lifestyle, isn't conducive to achieving disproportionate outcomes, which is a common theme on this podcast. When it comes to that nervous system conversation and that fight or flight conversation, one of the things we initially bonded over was nasal breathing, ironically, and the impact it had on my life and my performance, from a professional perspective, standing up in court, to a personal perspective, managing my lower back pain after I'd hurt of back squatting to the point I couldn't sit down or walk without pain. And then running around Central Park at 6 o'clock in the morning, breathing through our noses as fast as we can, right? It's something that I think I really want to focus on here, is the sustainability and longevity of human performance and optimization. There's so many different directions and modalities about what's the best, and really it's what's best for you. And so when people are having that curiosity to explore what's best for them, how do you offer a strategy to navigate that conversation of, I don't work out or move right now, but I'm curious about it and I want to start? Where and how can I start without being upset that I fall off the wagon every other day? Maybe they're a professional with a really intense job and they don't, quote, have time. What's a good place to start pushing themselves? What direction can someone start pushing themselves to achieve a physique that they're comfortable with and a lifestyle that they're comfortable with, so they could start optimizing and living a purpose-driven life?
So for me, how I look at it, it's a very good question, is, so I look at a person and then it really comes down to the breathing first. So, because oxygen is the number one, it's prana, life force. You know, we need oxygen to survive and to live, in a sense. So if the person, most people I see, 99% that say like hyperventilate on a constant basis, so chronically suffering from low oxygen, so you upper chest breathing all the time, and nobody's nose breathing, and they're so disconnected from themselves, and that drives so much cortisol on its own. When you take the person and just teach them how to breathe, that's the number one thing I'm looking at. It's like, okay, I teach you how to breathe and start doing that like 5 to 10 minutes, twice, 3 times a day. All of a sudden the person wakes up in the morning, has a better sleep, and is less stressed out. So on top of that, I look at hydration and mineralization, because if I just drink 3 liters of water a day without any minerals in it or salt or anything, you strip your body from minerals and you chronically dehydrated. So if you have both of those, lack of oxygen, chronically dehydrated, that itself causes so much stress to the body that whatever you start doing, you probably have a hard time to sustain because it causes more stress. So rather than adding something to it, I want to take out the stress at first. So looking at the breath, hydration, and then how the body is aligned in general. And you'd be surprised how much aware people are when they take the first pieces together, meaning like when they breathe proper and then all of a sudden they hydrate and mineralize the body, all of a sudden they feel better, so they can be more present. And then, for example, when they go for a walk, they can just observe themselves. How does my body move? How do my feet feel on the ground? So when you start with that, all of a sudden the person feels better and better. And then whatever they want to do, really, they can start doing because it's sustainable. So they can start with push-ups or whatever they want. If they want to start running, they should start running. But it's more of a place from, okay, I have a stress cup. If my stress cup is overflowing and I want to add more stress through training, it's probably not going to be sustainable for me unless I'm going to lack in other parts of my life, whether it's family, job, or so forth. So if I'm able to take something out of this cup through breathing and hydration, and then just like more body awareness, all of a sudden I really can do anything I want, whether it's like lifting, running, sprinting, swimming, whatever you want, and that's really the starting point. And a lot of people, especially on a high level, whether it's entrepreneurs, CEOs, athletes, and so forth, they already so stressed out through their day-to-day life that it's really the number one thing is like take a little bit out of the stress through simple things. And again, it doesn't take like hours a day. It's more like you first start with 5-10 minutes, 2-3 times a day, and then you implement it into your day-to-day life and it becomes your life. So for me, when I switched to nose breathing, of course it sucked for the first 8 weeks during training. And that's years ago. Because I remember I was jump roping a lot, and I started jump roping nose breathing and had to stop every 2 minutes because I couldn't anymore. And like, this is terrible. But again, it's just like you're training a muscle. It's the same thing. Over time, you get better and better. And all of a sudden, as I said, like last year, I was running 5:30 miles, nose breathing only. And it's doable, but the number one thing what I noticed is that I wasn't burned out afterwards. Yes, I was tired, but I was not exhausted. Because when you nose breathe, when you focus on your breathing through exercise and everything you do in life, your body only gives as much as it really should give. And again, there's really no limit. You can train your body and your nervous system to a really high level. And that's why the high level athletes who are on top of the game for a very long time, if you look at Cristiano Ronaldo, for example, he's up there because he's doing all that on a daily basis. He's taking out stress on a daily basis. He focuses on proper breathing, and he's calm and he's centered when he has to shoot a penalty or something like this. He's there, he's present in the moment because his mind is not racing because he has his breath under control and his nervous system regulation.
And it's almost like we have this appetite for greatness, but we have to blunt it with discipline. And part of that discipline is understanding the available tools to us, like nasal breathing, and trusting that, like you said, by implementing these tools, they're not going to solve all of our problems, but they'll help us lead a higher quality of life through mindful movement and implementing these types of practices. Something else that I love your takes on are about nutrition and intuitive eating. I think intuitive eating gets a very, I don't want to say bad rap, but misunderstood because people can't relate to it. And it seems like this self-righteous practice that fit people offer to the general population as if it's this achievable outcome in a short period of time, when in reality, people are suffering from the consequences of habits that include inhaling chemically engineered foods that make us want to eat more. And they end up engaging in these spiraling out internal conversations that makes them feel very hopeless and sad as a result because they feel like they have no control. And it makes outcomes and physiques and performance goals seem far out of reach based on poor habits and poor education and weak discipline, when in reality, our bodies are fighting science. And it's, for me, it opened up the internal conversation where it's like, all right, like there's someone in a lab literally trying to get me addicted to these foods. So I don't want to feel so bad every time like I eat a snack that I enjoy and then start binge eating. But at the same time, I also want to have enough discipline to know that if I start, no matter how much discipline I have, there's something hormonal or appetizing about it that's going to make me want to keep consuming this thing regardless. From your perspective, when it comes to intuitive eating, how can people start to cultivate a regimen or a lifestyle around an education that allows them to start practicing an intuitive lifestyle?
There's a few aspects, but one of the first one is really, again, coming down to if someone is never really breathing proper, you can't be present in the moment. And then if you're not present, you can never listen to your intuition. So there's a massive disconnect between your intuition and your own body. So the minute I was like, okay, if I've been doing this for years, for example, sit down before a meal and like breathe 3 to 5 times really slow and deep and just like bless the food. But if someone doesn't want to do that, it's more like, okay, how can I practice intuitive eating? It's more, okay, there's a baseline of nutrition we all know about, which should be whole foods, minimal processed. So if you choose out of those, if your kitchen and your fridge looks like this already, and then it's just like, in a sense, if you ask yourself and you look at foods, I'm in a place now where I look at food and I know I should be eating this right now. And every time I go against the grain and say, okay, I'm gonna just follow, for example, a super high protein diet to get as lean as possible, within days I would not feel good. It's very, first of all, it's very individualized, and everyone's body works a little bit different. And then it really comes down to how you want to feel in the moment. So there's nothing wrong with eating eggs and avocado and so forth for breakfast. It's healthy and it's great. For example, if I do that on a daily basis, I just don't feel as good because it weighs me down. So I'm better off like not eating as heavy or anything in the morning. If I do something, I add some form of fat or whatever to my coffee, tea. That's what I do because I know intuitively it makes me feel better. And I know also I'm in my body and I know that feels better. So we can hire any nutritionist or whatever, and like you get on a plan and you lose weight, you feel good at the times, but then it's also, is it sustainable for yourself? So it's more about cutting out all the noise, junk food and so forth, and then coming back to being present with yourself. And then eventually you make the right choices. And then I don't believe without trial and error, you'll find the ideal diet for yourself, because we also individualize it. We don't really know anything like we don't know enough yet about the human body. There's people like Brian Johnson, like he's like, oh, I'm going to live forever, and this is exactly what you need to eat to reverse aging. But all that stuff doesn't really translate into like a day-to-day life in a sense where it's sustainable. So it all comes down, intuitive eating is like choose whole foods and then eat what makes you feel good. And for example, I have a friend, he can drink a gallon of raw milk a day and eats 2 pounds of red meat and feels amazing. So if I do that, I don't feel good. That's just what it is. I have to take the ego out of it and saying, okay, I don't necessarily need to do that to get to my goals. My goal is to feel good and vibrant on a daily basis. And that individual diet, eating pattern, nutrition, whatever you want to call it, looks different for every single person. And there's probably a lot of overlapping overall, but in general, everyone needs to find their own path. And it's just what nobody wants to do anymore, because everyone wants to take a pill and get in shape, don't do any work, can eat whatever they want, and then like, oh look, I can eat French fries and sandwiches all day long and I'm in great shape. Yeah, but what else do you take? That's a kind of like the number one thing I'm at right now. And it's rather looking at other people and other people's plates. Just look at yourself, and we have all the answers within ourselves. That's the number one thing I tell everyone. It's like you don't have to really look on the outside, look inward, and then you have all the answers. And once you have that figured out, meaning like once you find actually the voice within in yourself and have the intuition you can tap into. You know whether you should do X, Y, and Z or eat whatever. It's about listening to your own higher self. And if someone believes in God or not, I do, and I do believe intuition is nothing different than God talking through us. And the world is so noisy right now, and there's so much input from the outside, whether it's social media, whether it's all the news, everyone wants to tell you something different, that we're so detached from our own self that nobody can listen to that voice anymore. So if I'm able to reconnect to this inner voice, then I know eventually what I'm going to eat and what I want to do with my life, and it's the same with like finding your purpose. People always like, so how can I find my purpose? I don't know what to do with my life. I've been there for a very long time, and then in the end of the day, it's really like Rumi says that, and it's like a very famous quote. It's like the goal of life is to find your gift, the purpose to give it away. And once you only can find that in the present moment. I can't find that being like distracted 24/7 and like in high cortisol fight or flight mode. You'll never find your purpose. All you want to do is run away from a tiger. So it's like, okay, it's in those moments where you dial back a little bit, actually be with yourself and focus on your breathing, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now things start to make a lot of sense. What happened to me is like, okay, I know what I'm good at. I know I can hold space for people. I know I can listen. I know I can tell people certain things and show and help them on a mental and physical, emotional level. And then, yeah, that's my gift. So what's the purpose? The purpose to give it away. So how can I give it away? It's like, okay, I create something where I can help eventually millions of people. And it's not that difficult. But the problem is that the difficult part is to find that gift. And the gift you can only find when you're present with yourself and when you're actually aware. And when you're not aware, it becomes a race your entire life. So you jump from A to B from B to C, and you'll never be fulfilled, because then the driver, you have the wrong driver. Potentially might be, okay, I need to get rich, I need to get X, Y, and Z, I need to have a big house, big car. And you get to those places that you think you'd be happy. I mean, I'm not like everyone talks about that. You chase something and you get there and you're still miserable because you don't do anything for others. That's why you having even a podcast, for example, and I know you do so much more beyond that, but it's like giving back to people, sharing what we know, what we do, what our point of view is on how we navigate through life. That's giving back to people. That's really what it all comes down to, because as humans, we are meant to live in a community. And if you look around the world, whether it's through politics, whether it's through diet, fitness, everything is driven apart, and there's different camps. And yeah, of course, I want to be part of one of those camps because I want to be part of something. But does it serve you on a long in a way for the long run? Most likely not, because eventually you'll get tired of that, because it's not really fulfilling if you just like put yourself in a box. Because living in a box gets very, very empty and very boring eventually. And I've done that so many times in my life, where I'm like, okay, I want to be open to life. I want to experience life, because we only have a certain amount of years. So how can I live a full life where I am the best version of myself on a daily basis, to inspire others, but also showing up for others and be able to help them? And this is really only achievable through discipline and awareness, surrendering, and being willing to really start over again, and never being really afraid of going back to kindergarten, because if I'm only doing shit that I'm good at, I'm not going to learn. It's like, for you did a 50-mile ultra marathon. Yeah, you could just train long distance and you get better and better. But no, you say, I want to do a 3-hour marathon. Yeah, that's hard. It's hard shit. You get back to kindergarten, do the shit over and over again, and then you get there, and then you start climbing another mountain. But the thing is, really, what I kind of disagree with certain people like Goggins is, if you keep pushing physically only, the mental and the emotional part and the soul part eventually goes down the drain, and then you'll feel burned out, disconnected from yourself, and most likely from other people, because you can't relate to yourself anymore and other people. So the humane part is very, very important. And I feel in our society, it's not getting talked enough about, because yeah, there's people like Joe Dispenza, there's Tony Robbins and so forth, but they all, from certain categories, been looked at a little bit woo-woo, and oh, they out there, I can't really relate to that. But it really comes just down to to your own awareness. Believing in yourself is the number one thing. And then you can, from that place, you can create whatever you want with your life.
I think what we're talking about at a holistic level is well-being, and understanding that there's multiple dimensions to well-being, and most of us have the conversation around mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. But there's also the occupational element of things that people over index on, where they tend to wrap up their identity and purpose in what they do for a living, and tend to under index in the other dimensions of their life. And having that holistic approach where you realize there's an element of fulfillment that comes from dipping your toe in all of the pillars that make up well-being at a high level, and I believe there's 8 of them. It's a matter of having enough awareness, right, to understand where you have that presence or lack that presence, and not having a gut reaction to things. Something I'm working on is taking that pause and a breath before I respond to things. And I remember in court, I used to have this sensation where I felt this urgency to respond to an argument, but I would just ramble. I wouldn't have anything meaningful to say, and I'd have to ramble my words until I finally, to buy time until I finally had a meaningful thing to share and argue back, which would then become effective, but it should have been the first thing that I said. And so I had to get comfortable with silence. I had to get comfortable with 10 seconds to respond without the judge or the defense attorney being like, "Are you okay, bro?" And just sitting with myself. When I finally got to that place after COVID, my second half of my career at the DA's office was way stronger, not just because of the experience, but because I understood at a high level there's a pause that comes before reacting. The nervous system, honing it and making sure I'm not sitting in fight or flight all the time. And having that awareness, which is another theme that we talk about. You mentioned it a ton. I mentioned it. Presence, we also go back and forth on. You know how I feel about that as a core value. Also, a very key point of what I talk about in my seminars when I teach about well-being. It's one of those things that we have to learn as humans. And also, to your point, that giving back element, purpose through service, where we serve people instead of how do I make more money, is who can I help? How can I serve? How can I be of more value? How can I share more? But also understanding that not everything you and I or anyone is going to say is gospel, but finding those people that you can relate to that'll help open up the aperture so you can digest new information, synthesize it, process it, develop an opinion on it, and then put it out into the world. Not just repeat things for the sake of repeating things, you know? And I feel like through experience, you've been able to garner a meaningful opinion to the point where you're talking about neck training, but like this guy puts a towel in his mouth with a 50-plus-pound kettlebell hanging from it and like goes back and forth. This isn't like some woo-woo stuff. Like this guy's neck is strong. And why that's important is because his head sits on top of it. So what he's saying is rooted in strength. It's rooted in practice. It's rooted in actual experience and vulnerability, in understanding where he lacked fulfillment, where he lacked purpose, that now he helps people cure those dimensions of their lives. Some of it spiritual, some of it emotional, some of it physical. And I know that you have deeply struggled with these issues to the point that now you have an expertise and proficiency that you can offer meaningful insight. So it makes a ton of sense because I've learned from you. Sugar was a killer for me when I was training back then. And even if it was honey and I eliminated all of the refined sugars from my diet, there's still that role that sugar's playing, even if I want to eat it at night. But even with intuitive eating, like you were talking about, it is as simple as knowing what's best for you. Sometimes I'll train for 2 hours and I won't want to eat after. Sometimes I won't train at all and I'll be starving in the morning. So it's one of those things that you have to navigate that process of and trust your gut, for lack of a better way of putting it. The next kind of direction that I want to take this in before we wrap up is the training routine becoming jail. Something that you and I were chatting about before the podcast, that you have friends and know people, and you know, to my wife's credit, I'd probably be one of them if she didn't get me out of the house. That that tether themselves to a routine so densely they can't go and explore life. Now, we're using the example of fitness, but people have their routines in life and forget to experience life. Where's that line between routine and discretion to go explore the world?
I've been there many times in my life, where my routine becomes my own prison. And then again, you live in this box and yeah, it's comfortable because you're in control, but it's like there's nothing to experience anymore. And then at that times, I also didn't really meet new people. I didn't have any amazing experiences because you're so caught up in your own world. So I believe how I look at life is now, yeah, I have a routine, I have a morning routine, I have a routine through my life, but it's very important to be adaptable. I want to be thrown into a shark tank and swim with them any day of the week, But if have to be in control of everything 24/7, I never have the ability to jump into a new experience or a new challenge because it's like, oh, I have to do this X, Y, and Z. If I'm not at the gym at that time of the day, I'm not a complete human. So it comes back to like detachment, where which is a big thing I practice on myself, and I really tell everyone, because people always think detachment means you own nothing, but it's actually the opposite. When you detach yourself, that means nothing owns you. So if I'm able to have a routine, but I'm not fully attached to it, so I can detach myself, this routine is not gonna own me, nor does it serve me in a terrible way. So if I'm able to still travel and I'm like, okay, I come to that place, I still can do the work and I can still show up for myself. But it's more about like having an open mind and is to new possibilities. Because otherwise, we're just stuck in the same pattern over and over again. And when you wake up every morning, you do the same thing and you expect a different outcome. At the end of the day, it's not going to happen. So you have to have an open mind, and you have to have being open on a spiritual level as well as on a physical and emotional level, where you're like, okay, what if I'm not going to drink this 16-ounce lemon water this morning? Am I going to still survive? Yeah, most likely you will. So you can also skip that some days and you go or do something completely different. Or you can have a coffee first thing in the morning. Maybe it serves you better. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, it's an experience. And I mentioned this before the podcast, is the experience called life. This is a human experience. And how can I make this the most amazing one in this time I'm here? And it's not going to be the most amazing one if I'm caught in a crazy morning routine or a crazy routine in general. Yes, we have to have discipline. We have to show up for ourselves. But this can also be part of a life that's like more flexible and more movable around, so I can move that around more easy, and I don't have to be like at 6 a.m. in the gym. Otherwise, like my day is not complete, because we create our own belief system. So if I have this belief system, of course, I'm not going to feel good. It's the same thing if I tell myself, oh, if I'm not hitting 200 grams of protein, I wake up the next morning, I'm not going to feel good. If I do that long enough, that's what's going to happen. I'm not going to feel good because it's a belief system we created for ourselves. So when I step out of this belief system and I have an open mind, and again, comes back to like not being afraid of going back to like kindergarten, and really have the beginner's mind and the childlike mentality. Because you have two kids, you see them, they want to try everything, they like everything, some things they don't like, and then they explore. And that's kind of like what we forget as humans, as adults, to explore and being open to change, and being open, to experience life in a full manner. Because I even talk to people, they have everything. They have the biggest house in Beverly Hills, they have like yards, whatever, and they're still miserable. They go on their vacation and they're still not happy. So why is that? Because they so caught up in this belief system that they have to have so much in order to be happy, and they're still not happy. So it comes down to like, how you're treating yourself on a daily basis. And again, coming back to what we said earlier, how you treat other people, what do you do for other people, how you're in service for others, and this is really, it's an endless journey. That's the most important part to understand. It's a journey that never ends. And if you truly want to find happiness in life, you have to be enjoying the journey more than the destination. And that's really the number one thing, and there's many books written about that. And if you enjoy the journey more than you enjoy the destination, because there's no destination to be found anyways, then you'll have the best life. And then you're also not getting upset. And it's I find myself still falling into old habits and like, oh, I can do X, Y, and Z. No, it's not true. You can't do things because you can't just do things.
My man, the question that I pose to all my guests that I'm not going to pose to you, you know this one well. If the future version of yourself from 10 years from now were to fly in and offer you some advice in order to get there, what do you think he would say to you?
Be gentle with yourself.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jules Horn. So happy to have you on, brother. Where can people keep up with your journey?
Thank you for having me on. Instagram is the easiest, Jules_Horn. I'm going to launch Mindful Movement very, very soon, probably end of the month. It's going to be Mindful Movement with a D at the end.com. We're launching the website end of the month. There you can find all about the coaching program and the things I'm doing. And then, I've on X, Jules Horn 01, and that's about it, yeah.
This was awesome, man. I know everyone's going to get a ton of value out of this. If you did get any value out of this and think someone may benefit from it, please share it with a friend. Thank you so much for tuning in. Rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Once again, my name is Jonathan Cohen, and this is Inside Me Inspired.